what it means to have an effect in English. Now, it's a word that English teachers use all the time. Exam boards use all the time. It's really, really common. But you might be thinking to yourself, well, what does that word actually mean? And you might think you don't really know what it means. That is what I'm going to aim to cover with you today. So let's do this. When we look in a dictionary about what it means to have an effect, or just what effect means as a word, there's actually 15 different definitions. That's in the Collins dictionary. So it makes sense that it can feel quite confusing to try and understand it, because when a word has that many potential meanings, you have to ask yourself which one applies in this situation. And so that's what I'm going to be aiming to cover. When we're dealing with English language and English literature that we study in school, what does the teacher mean when they say to have an effect? An important thing to keep in mind is that it could mean that that word means something different if we're dealing with art or science or history. It could have a slightly different meaning. But what I'm going to cover here will get you covered for English. So in terms of the thinking about what the word effect means, I go for a pretty basic definition. It's what a text makes you think and what it makes you feel. And what it makes you think and feel can be about quite a few different things going on in the text. So it could be what it makes you think and feel about setting, about character, about a theme, or also about the real world, also known as like the context. And we actually call that context of reception, how the audience is responding, how the real world audience is responding to a text. But you can also have context of production, which is about how the author is influenced by things going on in the text. And I've just kind of gone off on a tangent there. I'll do a separate video on context. But yeah, just so you're kind of clear on what I'm talking about there. It's about things in the real world that have influenced the writer when they were producing the text, or have influenced the reader when they're experiencing it. So in terms of what a text makes you think and feel about setting, character, a theme, the real world, that's pretty straightforward, right? There's no master genius to it, because when you are trying to understand a text, all you have to ask yourself is, what does it make you think and what does it make you feel? Now, I don't want to get into the kind of complicated academics of it all, but in the world of English, there is actually this debate about to what extent the reader's thoughts and feelings matter above or below the writer's original intentions. So let's say, for example, a text makes you think or feel something that I, as the writer, did not intend. Does that mean that you just misunderstood my text? Or does it mean that your interpretation is really valid and you've thought of something, and even if I didn't intend it, it still counts? So there are some people in the academic world of English, for example, that would say that the writer's intention is the most important thing. We should always be trying to take an almost like historical approach, like really studying the writer and trying to assess what their real intentions would be, and that's what's really important. Other people say, we can never know the writer's intentions, and therefore anything that we take from a text is not really the writer's intentions, it's the reader's interpretation. And some people sit more in the middle, like there are some things we can know that the writer intended and those are important, but there are also things that a reader can take from it and those are important, the kind of middle ground. My point basically is, in trying to explain all of this, is that when we're talking about the effect of a text, it's really, really valid for you to think about what it makes you think and feel. However, that doesn't mean you can make up whatever you want, unfortunately, because the way that exams work is that they expect you to be able to defend yourself. So if you read a chunk of text and you say that it makes you feel really scared, and there is absolutely nothing in the text to suggest fear, and you don't remotely explain how fear is created, you're not going to be believed. You're going to be marked down for having an idea that's incorrect or anything like that. On the other hand, you might think about something or feel something that perhaps the examiner themselves didn't see, but because you were then able to explain why that effect was created for you, where that feeling came from, where those thoughts came from, how they were created in the text, then suddenly the effect that the text had on you could be valid because you've been able to defend it. So that's why effect is really closely tied in with inference and with analysis, those other two terms that you might hear a lot. Inference you probably don't hear as much, and I'll explain why in a second, but analysis I know you'll hear all the time. So first of all, in terms of what inference and analysis are, you need to have a look at my videos on those two terms, but I'll just kind of briefly go over it here. So inference is about what we understand in the implicit meaning in a text, the kind of reading between the lines of what the writer is trying to say. Analysis is how we break down how that meaning is created. So inference, what is the meaning? Analysis, how is that meaning created? Effect is in many ways synonymous with inference, right? Because they're both about what is it that we take away from the text? What is the meaning that we take away from the text? If I was to try and pinpoint, well, what's the difference between the two then? I guess my argument would be that inference is a bit more about specific words or sentences and the exact implicit meaning that they create. Whereas effect is more of an overall, it's about how all these different inferences come together to create an overall feeling. It's that overall considering all these different things that are being done. What does a text make you think? What does a text make you feel? Whereas we tend to infer from specific little chunks, and we'll look at them much more closely. Effect is also really important for then going to analysis, because if you haven't figured out what the effect of a text is, you're not going to be able to analyze. That's the kind of necessary prerequisite, right? You have to have thought about what is this text trying to say? What is the meaning in it? And then you can break down how that meaning is created. Then again, if you just talk about effect, if you just say the text makes me feel this, the text makes the reader think this, then you're going to fall into the problem that I was talking about before, where you're not supporting your claim. Okay, anything you say about effect can't just be accepted as true and valid. You're going to have to defend it, and that's where analysis comes in. So effect, thinking about the effect in a text, is an important first step before you can then look at things much more closely and try to analyze. But also you need analysis to prove that your idea about effect is correct. Last thing I want us to do is to have a little look at how thinking about effect works in practice. So to do that, we're going to have a look at an extract from The Road to Wigan Pier by George Orwell. Now, it's important to note that what I'm looking at here is a very generic approach to thinking about the effect in a text. And actually, if you're a student doing the English language or literature GCSE, there are more kind of specific strategies that you're going to be able to apply depending on the question that you're dealing with. So make sure you have a look at my videos that are specific to those exam questions, or you have a look at my courses over at Stream English. So when we're thinking about the effect of a text, it can be quite an instinctive thing to do, because it's ultimately, what does it make you think or feel? And that means that your brain is basically having to process some of the millions or billions, I don't even know, trillions of tiny pieces of information that it's picked up over your life about what different things mean and what different things represent. So you'll often be able to look at something and instantly have a kind of gut feeling, is this a good place or a bad place? Or you'll look at a character and you'll be able to instinctively feel, are they a good character or a bad character? FYI, typically in the 21st century, in the golden age of television, being able to look at a character and know if they're good or bad is seen as more of a sign of like lazier writing. So some writing today, when it comes to character and actually setting, like the Stepford Wives comes to mind, they're trying to actually trick you, they make it seem really good when actually there's something really bad. But even then, they're relying on your understanding of something being good in order to trick you into thinking it's good when actually it's bad. Point is, When you look at a wood, okay, and the sun is shining and there's someone walking their dog and there's, autumn leaves littering the path, you're supposed to kind of look at that picture and think, oh, that's nice. When you're looking at a wood and it's very, very dark and there's a fog and there's a blonde girl all on her own with a torch and it's run out of battery, you know something bad is coming, because you've been taught that by many, many different things throughout your life. So when we look at this little extract of text, here's what I want you to do. I want you to just instinctively ask yourself, what do I think are the words in this text that are having an effect on me? Every single time there is a word that has an effect on you that you think, that's making me think something, or that's making me feel something, I want you to highlight it or underline it. And I've put in the description for this video a link just to a little document that's got this text on it so that you can have a go at doing that. Now, I'm going to start by reading it without any gut highlighting of my own so that you have a chance to do it. And then I'm going to go back through it and then do my own gut highlighting. And then we'll take the next step to think about what is the effect that all of these words are creating. So here we go. If you need to go download the document, pause me now. Otherwise, let's start reading. The train bore me away through the monstrous scenery of slag heaps, chimneys, piled scrap iron, foul canals, paths of cindery mud crisscrossed by the prints of clogs. This was March, but the weather had been horribly cold, and everywhere there were mounds of blackened snow. As we moved slowly through the outskirts of the town, we passed row after row of little grey slum houses running at right angles to the embankment. At the back of one of the houses, a young woman was kneeling on the stones, poking a stick up the leaden waste pipe which ran from the sink inside and which I suppose was blocked. I had time to see everything about her: her sacking apron, her clumsy clogs, her arms reddened by the cold. She looked up as the train passed, and I was almost near enough to catch her eye. She had a round, pale face, the usual exhausted face of the slum girl who is 25 and looks 40 thanks to miscarriages and drudgery. And it wore, for the second in which I saw it, the most desolate, hopeless expression I have ever seen. It struck me then that we are mistaken when we say that it isn't the same for them as it would be for us, and that people bred in the slums can imagine nothing but the slums. For what I saw in her face was not the ignorant suffering of an animal. She knew well enough what was happening to her, understood as well as I did how dreadful a destiny it was to be kneeling there in the bitter cold on the slimy stones of a slum backyard, poking a stick up a foul drain pipe. Alright, so if you need a little bit more time to keep making your highlights, pause me now so you can do that. Otherwise, I'm going to start going through it. Now remember, this is very much about my instincts, okay? This is what instinctively means something to me. Just because you didn't highlight something that I did doesn't mean that you've made some colossal mistake. And if I don't highlight something that you did, doesn't mean that I've made some colossal mistake. We all take from things different meaning. Hopefully though, by the end of this, we both reach the same conclusion either way. So, the train bore me away. That word. It didn't just take him away, it bore him away. And that means something. Through the monstrous, definitely, scenery of slag heaps, chimneys, piled scrap iron, foul canals, paths of cindery mud crisscrossed by the prints of clogs. I'm going to go crisscrossed, I feel like is having an effect on me there. I would say clogs, but I feel like that's like a contextual thing. I don't understand clogs in perhaps the same way that George Orwell does. When I hear clogs, I think of like traditional Swiss outfits, which is not going to be what George Orwell was intending here. So I'm not going to highlight that because I think he is doing it for effect, but I don't think I understand what effect I'm supposed to be taking from it because we have different understandings of the word clogs. This was March. He's telling me it's March on purpose, but the weather had been horribly cold, and everywhere there were mounds of blackened snow. As we moved slowly through the outskirts of the town, we passed row after row of little grey slum houses running at right angles to the embankment. At the back of one of the houses, a young woman was kneeling on the stones, poking a stick up the leaden waste pipe, which ran from the sink inside and I suppose was blocked. It is having an effect on me. I'm going to go with poking a stick with the leaden waste pipe. That's what's having an effect on me there, is those particular bits. I had time to see everything about her, her sacking apron, her clumsy clogs. Okay, so clogs must be a shoe worn by poor people. That must be it. That must be the context I'm not understanding. So the prince of clogs is going to be something about conveying just how many poor people are in this area, maybe. Her arms reddened by the cold. She looked up as the train passed, and I was almost near enough to catch her eye. She had a round, pale face, the usual exhausted face of the slum girl who is 25 and looks 40 thanks to miscarriages and drudgery, and it wore, for the second in which I saw it, the most desolate, hopeless expression I have ever seen. It struck me then that we are mistaken when we say that it isn't the same for us, isn't the same for them as it would be for us, and that people bred in the slums can imagine nothing but the slums. For what I saw in her face was not the ignorant suffering of an animal. She knew well enough what was happening to her. She understood, as I did, how dreadful a destiny it was to be kneeling there in the bitter cold on the slimy stones of a slum backyard, poking a stick up a foul drain pipe. Okay, so I've just followed that instinctive process of highlighting everything I think is having an effect on me. The reason this instinctive process is useful is because it helps me to kind of narrow down where I think the purposeful language is. So what I mean by purposeful language is the language that the writer is using on purpose because they're trying to have an effect, versus the necessary language of just like trying to convey, you know, plot and that kind of thing, like trying to make sure it makes grammatical sense. So that's why, like, I've rarely highlighted the word by or the or av or av. I kind of mixed together of and have there in my brain, but yeah, you get the idea. Like I've been highlighting actually a lot of words that have a lot of deeper meaning, a lot of implicit meaning, a lot of things for me to infer from them, rather than things that are much more explicit and things that are just there for communicating the necessary thing for it to make sense. So now that I've done that, if I'm trying to think about the effect, that whole kind of thought and feeling I get, I now want to think about the patterns. Okay, so I want to look at all these different words that I've got going on and ask myself, is there a kind of commonality between them in the way that they make me think or the way that they make me feel? Because if there is a pattern, if I'm frequently being made to think a certain thing or frequently being made to feel a certain thing, odds are that's what the writer intended. If I'm basing my idea of effect off of one single word and there is nothing else in the text that creates that similar effect, odds are that I'm kind of misguided in what I'm thinking, I'm misinterpreting. But if there is a pattern, if it keeps happening again and again and again, then it must be, or odds are it's on purpose there, and therefore it's something we can really kind of talk about and get into. So for me, looking at this, the main feeling that I get is like misery, basically. It's a very sad situation. I feel really sad for this girl. I think that this girl has had an incredibly difficult life. The lives of the poor are incredibly difficult. That's the effect that it's having. It's making me think that the poor have an incredibly difficult life, and this girl in particular has an incredibly difficult life, and it makes me feel sad for them. That's the effect that I'm taking out of this. So imagine we hadn't highlighted any of this. If a teacher just said to me, Mrs. Webb, what do you think the effect of this text is? My answer, nice and simple, it makes the reader feel sad for the difficult lives that the poor lead. Easy, isn't it, really? The next step, obviously, is a little bit harder because I've just made this statement. I now need to defend it, and that's where our analysis comes in. So obviously I've got a separate video of analysis, on analysis, that you'll be able to look at for that. But the basic idea is, what I'd start doing is, if I'm saying it makes me feel sad, I need to narrow down, okay, how is Orwell making me feel sad? If I'm saying that it highlights the difficult lives of the poor, how does it do that? So I'm going to start picking out the crafting going on. I'm going to start talking about that list in the opening line: slag heaps, chimneys, piles, scrap iron, foul canals. Foul canals. Yeah, I did say that right. For some reason I had in my head I said that wrong. Yeah, foul canals. Yeah, I'm saying that right? Foul. It sounds weird putting those two together. I'm getting so distracted today, I'm sorry. So yeah, I would look at that list and I would ask myself, what is the effect of having that list like that? What is the effect of the juxtaposition between blackened and snow? What are the connotations of the verb kneeling? What is the effect of that adjective, usual, exhausted face? There's loads and loads of things basically in here that I could pick on, and I'd have to kind of pick out that different crafting going on, and I'd break down how it creates the effect, because that is the point of analysis, essentially, is proving that the effect you've come up with is true. So what we've done so far is just think about effect on quite a kind of general big scale. Like, we've just read something and just talked generally about what effect does it have. But of course, back when I showed you the definition of effect, I talked about how you're often directed to talk about the effect of something really specific, like setting, character, theme, or context. Context is actually incredibly rare for GCSE. It's going to be setting, character, or theme, and you will choose to talk about context with English literature. So what I want to think about for a second is, well, how would that affect the process that we've just gone through? And the answer is, it wouldn't really, but it would just mean that we would focus our attention more on specific areas. Like, let's say, for example, if you had a question that was, how does the writer use language to present, this setting? We'd still think about the effect of the setting and the kind of feelings it creates, but we'd just focus on that. All this stuff about the slum girl, we wouldn't really pay much attention to. Conversely, if it was about character, we would focus on the character and the stuff about the character. If it was about theme, now exams never require you to come up with the theme yourself. They shouldn't do anyway. They should always give you the theme. That's an incredibly hard task if they're asking you to come up with the theme as well. And I say that as a teacher who has sometimes required students to come up with the theme to a text, but I'm just a cruel and vile person, what can I say? Anyway, the theme, you're going to be looking at setting and character, but what you're then going to do is bring it back to, what are the big ideas in the text? Why are the setting and character being presented the way they are? What are the writer's messages? What are the writer's ideas that they're trying to convey? If you're not sure what a theme is, check out my video entitled rather handily, "What is a theme?" In English, and then that will talk you through all of that. But with theme, you're going to be looking at everything in the text, but then bringing it back to writers' ideas, writers' messages, writers' intentions, and stuff like that. So the process that we've gone through can work for basically every kind of question. That kind of thinking about your gut instinct and highlighting on that gut instinct, thinking about how it then creates that overall thought and feeling before you then go on to analyse. That process will basically work for any kind of question that you're dealing with. So overall, with everything that we've looked at, the basic answer to what does it mean to have an effect is, what does it make you as the reader think or feel, and that talking about the effect is a really important first step for you to then be able to go on to analyse how that effect is being created in a text.